In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the Fury 3 action. So I've got a few examples of the effect lined up here that I'll just quickly click through. So I went from this photo, played the action, and got this one here. And lastly, this one, created that. So, okay, I'll close these all down, and I'm going to open up the photo that I'll work with, which is this one here. So there's a few things you just need to check off before we run the action, just to make sure that your Photoshop file is set up correctly and you don't run into any errors. So in your layer panel, your photo layer should look identical to this. It should say background with that lock symbol. So for example, if it doesn't, so I'll just delete that. If I open up my photo and it's called layer 1 or something else, just go to layer, new background from layer, just set it as the background. Next, go to this top right hand corner icon and go to panel options. Right down the bottom here, just make sure add copy to copied layers and groups is selected. Click OK. Next, go to image mode. Make sure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected. And I'll go to image size. Make sure you're using a good size photo. This one's 1600 by 2500. The smaller you go, the quality of the effects sort of diminish a bit. So I recommend, this photo effect works best with photos between about 2000 to 4000 pixels. So in that range, you'll get a really good result. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel that. So what we need to do now is outline our subject. We need to brush over our photo where we want to concentrate all the effects around. So what we need to do is create a new layer. So go to layer, new layer. It must be called brush, all in lowercase. You click OK. So there's our brush layer there. So whatever method you want to use to select your subject, you can use the magnetic lasso tool and sort of just draw, trace around your subject. Or I can hit B on the keyboard, get my brush out and select the color, and then start brushing over my photo like this. So rather than waste time watching me do that, I'm just going to open up one I've already brushed over, this one here. So you can see I've got my brush layer there. I just did a really quick job of brushing over my photo. So that's all you really need to do. Now we need to load up the actions panel. So go to window actions, pops up here, and this top right hand corner icon, hit that and go to load actions. Just load the fury3.atn file and it appears here, and we have our different options inside. Okay, so these options are the different directions of the effects. So you've got these. I'll just open up two examples to describe this. So I'll just open up this one again, and I'll open up this guy. I'll just zoom out a bit here. Now if you look at this one here, you notice that all the lines and those textures sort of go off on a diagonal angle. So if you now look into the actions panel, you can see next to that word diagonal, I've got that back slant there. So that's to indicate the direction of this effect. So you can see that there. So if I run the action on this one, all those lines and textures would be shooting off in the opposite direction. So there's also horizontal, which is this one here. So you can see all the effects going horizontally. There's also vertical and zoom as well to play around with. So you can try them all, see which one suits your photo the best. So I'll close these down. And okay, so here we have the photo again. So I'm going to play the action, this first one. Now if you want to check the progress when you're playing it back, twirl open this arrow here, and you'll see you got the scroll bar with all the commands that it needs to get through. So this action takes about 3 to 4 minutes to play back. It will take longer if you're using a large photo. So if you're using a photo like over 4000 pixels, it might take 5-6 minutes to play back. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Also, a good habit to get into before running any of my actions or any actions at all really, is you go to edit, purge, and if the option's there to click on all, click on it. It basically just clear out any history that might be stored away, because sometimes it can actually affect the playback of the actions. Like I might run the action on this photo now, it works perfectly, I might try it again, and then there'll be a random error that pops up. So it has been proven to solve that if you just go to edit, purge all before running the action. Alright, so I'm just going to click play, and this action is going to take, like I said, 3 to 4 minutes to play back. So I'm going to fast forward the video now and get to the result, then talk about how we can customize the effect. Alright, the action's stopped, and you can see here's the result that I've got. So another thing to keep in mind with this action is that every time you run it, you're going to get a completely different texture variation. So everything's going to look different every time you run it, even if you use the same brushed area. So if you want to run the action once, then save out that Photoshop file, run it 3 or 4 times and save out each result, and then compare them. Open up all those 4 Photoshop files and then work out which one looks the best. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize this actions panel and go inside the layer panel now, and with the folder that's selected, what I want to do is collapse all these folders so everything's a bit neater. So if I just hold down Control Alt Command Option on a Mac and just click on that arrow, you'll see that it's closed up all the folders, so everything's all neat. Alright, so as I said, if you want to run the action again, I've left the brush layer on up the top here. Just turn that one back on, shift select these 2 folders, delete them, and then you can play the action again. Okay, so I'll come back to the adjustments folder. There's just a lot of there's some color options and some ways we can adjust like the brightness and contrast and everything, so I'll come back to that, and we'll go inside the Fury 3 folder. So what you might notice is if you're running the action on people as subjects, that these glowing lines and textures might cross over the subject's face, so you probably want to erase that straight away. That's one of the first things to do. So I'll get to that straight away. Those glowing textures, all those red and orange lines and textures, is this folder here, main colored texture. I've highlighted that one in orange, so if I turn that one on and off, you can see that's that. So what you can do is a few ways you can erase this texture. So you've got this mask here, this folder mask. So if I just grab a black brush, if I hit B on the keyboard and make sure I've got black as my active color, if I just brush into that mask, I can erase that texture. Okay. Now if I wanted to brush on, if I wanted to have more control over where this appeared, I could invert that texture, hit Control I or Command I. So now I've hidden everything. So now I can grab my white brush, I'll switch that over to white, and then I can start brushing in where I want those lines to appear. So you don't have to have it appear everywhere. You can control where you want it to appear. But okay, so I'm just going to undo that. Okay, so I want to clean up these textures over his hood. So what I can do, I can try this. I can brush black into that mask there to erase that. But what you'll notice is there's a bit of inconsistency with the color. You see his jumper there is a bit orange, but then he's quite green here. I'll tell you why that's happening. I'll just undo that. I'll just fill that white again. If you go inside this folder, we've got 3 layers, okay, that create the effect. So this bottom one, main texture, if I'll turn that one on and off, actually I'll start from the bottom. So here's your main texture here. Okay, so you can move that one around, you can duplicate it, do what you want. Then this one here, add glow 2, it's a copy of that layer and it just adds some glow to it. And then this one here, add glow 1, adds a lot of glow. So you can see as I turn that one on and off, you see how the glow sort of bleeds over our subject. So if you look at his face, as I turn it on and off, see how the orange glow is bleeding over the top. So that's why when you brush that away, it's getting rid of that glow, like that. So what you can do, what I prefer to do, is just control, go into these layer masks and brush away each one by one. So I'll brush, get rid of that glow around all this area, and then I'll go into this mask and I'll just brush that effect away, and then go to the bottom one and I'll brush that away, just like that. You know, work on creating some consistency, make sure everything sort of blends well, just like that. Okay. Now, so what you can also do with this folder is duplicate it. So if I hit Control J, I've duplicated all the effects. Now if I hit Control E, I can flatten that folder. So now what I've got all those effects with the glows on one layer. So I mean, you can move this around like this. You can then do that mask trick before. What I did, I inverted the mask, and then you can kind of just brush on. If I grab a white brush, I can sort of brush on where I want those effects to appear. Or what I usually do with this effect is, if I just zoom out a bit here, I scale it up, scale it right up like that, so you can create some cool effects that way, and you know, move it around, see what variations you can get. That looks pretty good. Hit enter to confirm that. Zoom back in, and then what I like to do is just blur it out a bit. Okay, so I just go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'll just blur that out, move that up there. So don't forget to try that as well. So duplicate that folder, flatten it, then scale it up, and then yeah, move it around and see what kind of effects you can come up with. Okay, I'll just turn that off for the moment because we'll go back in here and I'll show you how to recolor these effects. So you'll notice that each one of these layers, the glow and the main texture, have got this solid color applied to it. So if you just double click on this box, this is where you can change the color. But one thing you need to know is that if I want to change this, say, to a blue, I need to change all those 3 orange boxes to blue. So a quick way to do this, if I just pick a blue here, okay, and I'll just select this number here, this value. I'll hit Control C to copy that, and all I need to do is just double click on these boxes and paste it. Control V, Control V. So now all that's been changed to blue. Okay. Now there is another quick way to change those colors if you want. If you go into the adjustments folder, just down the bottom here, you've got this one, quick color changer. If you turn that one on, it'll apply that all just a solid color. So you can quickly flick around through the colors there. But if you want to use an orange like that, I would say the best way to use that is to leave it at that default result, which is like, because you'll notice that the effect is created. Oops, undo that. See how that looks a lot better compared to if I turn this one on. See the difference there? Okay, so just keep that in mind, but if you want to go for like blues or greens, use that quick color changer. It's a quick way to change the color. Now, so yeah, you don't have to use each one of these. You can turn them off one by one. So I can just use that base effect there. And another thing you'll notice is the colors don't quite match. You see the orange there in that box versus it looks a bit more of a red color in our design. It's because of the blend mode of the folder here. So you'll see, if you look up the top here, the blend mode is set to hard light. So that's to basically create that default burning look. Okay, it's that blend mode that's doing that. So if I just switch this to pass through, that's actually the true color of the effect there. Alright, so play around with the blend mode of this folder. So you can go to add, so that looks pretty cool, but just keep in mind that by default it's set to hard light, but you might find, if I turn these back to blue quickly, that, and then change this blend mode to pass through. You might prefer that effect better. Try add. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. Just undo that. Okay, so we'll go back at the top here. So this folder here, directional lights, inside here there's just two layers and they're both turned off. If you want to add some soft directional lights, then you can turn these on. So you can see those there. And if you want to adjust them, I'll just turn this one off. If you double click on this box, you can change the angle of that light. So you can see as I rotate the angle there, the light's rotating. You can change the scale, so you make it really wide or narrow. I'll keep it about there. And also just check the opacity of this layer. It's currently set to 8%, so you can, if I hover over that word opacity, click, hold and drag to the right, I can quickly increase the opacity. So play around with that. I'll turn this one back on. I'll just adjust this angle to that, bring the opacity back down a bit. Something like that. If you want more lights, and just a quick way to duplicate the layer is if I hold down Alt or Option on the Mac, click on the layer and drag up. I've just created a copy, and then I can double click on that box and rotate the light again. Okay, just going to delete that. We'll keep those on. Now this folder here, lines, if I turn that one on and off, you can see that there. Basically, the more white elements you have in your photo, the more white lines it's going to create. So you can see that most of my photo was pretty dark, so you can see all these black lines coming off. But what I like to quickly do is experiment with the blend mode of this folder. So I can change that to add. You see that's created probably a better effect. Usually when I create these actions, I test across a lot of photos, and I find a setting that by default looks best across the most amount of photos. So I found that was highlight, but play around with the blend mode. Okay, so I just flick that to add then, and I prefer that because I can see these white lines shooting off down here, which looks pretty cool. If you want to have more lines, again, duplicate that folder, Control J. That looks pretty cool. It's sort of made them all a bit more prominent. Control E to flatten that layer, and then I can move these lines up like that. I'll just use this mask to hide a bit of them. Just like that. Okay, if you go inside, there's just 4 different layers that build up the line effect, so you can move them around, do what you want. Dots, if I turn this one on and off, you can see those dots there. So they just, by default, they will just hang around the perimeter of all these glowing textures. So if you go inside here, there's the main color, so I can change that to a blue, just like that. So just keep in mind that if you change all these to like a blue, those dots are still going to be orange. So you can go inside here and change the color there. You can also add more dots, like if I shift select these 2 layers, Control J to duplicate them, Control E to flatten them. I've now got them on a separate layer, so I can zoom out, Control T to scale it. Now I can scale them up a bit, and then I could blur them a little bit, so go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Just a subtle effect, but one you can play around with. I'll just leave that as is. Okay, do I want that back on? Looks pretty cool, but I'll just leave it for the moment. Okay, edge texture. So if I turn this one on and off, you can see around the borders of our design, there's that dark texture. So the opacity of this layer is only at 50%. So if I turn this up to 100, you can see it's much more prominent there. If I move this around, you can clearly see the effect there. Now if you want it even darker, you could just hit Control J to duplicate that. Sort of builds on top of it. but if you don't want it, turn it off, just like that. Sort of helps create that kind of tunnel vision where we focus on the center of our Photoshop file, our subject being in the center. So that can help with that. Next, this one here, darken lower half. If you turn that one on, what that does, it creates a gradient, a black gradient, black to transparent. So the bottom half of your Photoshop file, it overlays with black, and then it's transparent the top half. So you can see that working there. And the way I like to use this is firstly just turn it on and see if it suits your design. I mean, that looks pretty cool, but it's like it's flooding the colors too much around a subject. So what I like to do is just select the mask, hit B to get my brush out, and I'm going to use black because I want to erase some of that effect. So I can then brush on where I want to keep that original brightness of my photo. So I could brush a little bit on his foot here. But I kind of like the way it sort of tapers off and gets darker down here. Makes these glowing textures look pretty cool. So I'm going to leave that layer on. Darken edges. This one here is similar to the edge texture. So if I turn that one off and I flick this one on and off, you can see that it's just like a soft inner glow around the edges. If I turn that up to 100% opacity, you can see it there. So play around with, you know, these three layers here, or you know, if you want to adjust the border darkness or the edge darkness, play around with these two layers. I'm just going to turn this one down, it's a bit too strong. Leave that like that. Okay, we'll move on down. Texture parts. What I'll do, I'll just turn this one off, and then if I flick this folder on and off, you can see it's all those textures that grow around the middle or around our subject. Now by default they will cross over your photo a little bit as well. So you can see around this guy's hoodie there's like those that black scratchy texture. So again, if you run the action on a person and that texture sort of crosses over their face, use this mask again and just brush it away. Okay, just like that. So yeah, they're the two folder masks that you want to look at straight away when your action's finished. Just brush into them to remove any unwanted details, particularly around people's faces. So I go inside here and there's a bunch of different layers there that help build up the effect. You can click through them, but just take notice of the layer opacity of some of these effects. Like this one here is only set to 21. That one there is not doing too much, but play around with adjusting their opacity, also their blend mode. Texture number 10 is quite a prominent one. You want to check this one out. By default the opacity is at 40%. You can turn that one up to 100. You see it just makes all those textures much brighter. We can turn it off like that. So I'm just going to leave it about there. This one here, white smoke, by default it's off. You can turn it on and it just adds like a subtle little smoky effect, smoky texture over your subject. But what you can also do, if I zoom out excuse me, and hit Control T to scale that layer, if you scale it up like that, and I'll zoom in, I'll just adjust the opacity so you see it's a bit better. You can see it creates these little like smoky twirls. So you can play around with the opacity of that layer. By default I've turned it off, so just remember that. This actually looks pretty good with it on, so I'm just going to leave it on. This one here, light streak color, you can turn that to white. So it's just those subtle light streaks. Depending on what type of photo you use, that effect might be a lot more prominent. So, but I've set up where you can change the color. Okay, so let's keep that one in mind. So just play around as much as you want inside this folder. Duplicate layers, change their blend modes. Yeah, see what you can come up with. Also, check out as you're clicking through them, if you hold down Shift and click on the mask, it hides it, or temporarily hides it. So as you're going down, you can like shift select it, and you might notice that, you know, a certain texture might look really good with that mask hidden. Alright, I'll just keep going down. Alright, so here's the photo folder. So this is where, yeah, the main photo is. Now you want to spend a little bit of time in here, because I've set up where you can sort of make a few adjustments to the look of your photo, just to make sure that it seamlessly blends well with all the other textures around it. So this one here, soft photo glow, this is really subtle. Depends on, I guess, your photo and how much white is in that photo. It basically takes all the highlights of your photo, duplicates it and blurs it out. Just add a little bit of soft glow. Check the opacity again. That's 38. I'll turn that one up to 100. Yep, or you can just duplicate it to make it more prominent. But I don't actually think I need that. Okay, so moving on down, what I'll do, I'll go down to this layer here. So here's the main photo layer. Turn that one on and off. So that's where your photo sits. Now there are a bunch of adjustment layers here that you can use to fine tune the appearance of your photo. So by default, I've washed out a lot of the colors from the photo, and what you can do is select this layer here, black and white. Take a look at the opacity. If I turn that up to 100%, it removes all the color. So now that photo is completely black and white. If I bring it to 0, I've brought back all the color. So you can play around with the opacity of this layer here, see what looks best with your photo. This layer here, photo brightness, you can double click on this one and play around with these handles to adjust the brightness of your photo. So I'm just going to adjust this, and you can drag this one in. That's probably fine how it is. I'll leave that. Photo contrast, and I've got in brackets opacity. So if you select that, just notice the opacity is 47%. If you click on that word opacity and drag to the right, bring it to 100%, you notice that it really cranks up the opacity. I'll bring it to 0. So start off at 0 and then slowly drag to the right, and it'll add a bit of contrast and just, you know, see what suits your photo. And then this one here, I've got strong sharpening. Again, the opacity 30%. I'll turn it to 100. Flick between 0 and 100 so you can see that. So if you want to add some sharpening just to your photo, play around with that layer. And down the bottom here, I've got shadow. So if I turn the one on and off, it adds a shadow behind our subject, and it sort of shoots down. So you can turn that one on and off and see if it works with your photo or not. That's the photo folder. This one here, background color, you can double click on this box and, you know, apply a color to the background if you want. So blue. So yeah, keep that one in mind. Image toning, this one just adds a little bit of contrast over the background texture. Don't really need to play around with that one too much. Darken background, if I turn that one on and off, what that is, if I double click on that, it is a gradient, a radial gradient that starts off black around the edges and fades off towards the middle. So just adds like a vignette over the background texture. Adjust the opacity of this, play around with that, turn it to 100, you know, or start at 0, slowly drag to the right. That looks pretty good. Now this folder here, background texture, if I turn that on and off, you can see that's the main background texture. And if you go inside, there's a bunch of different layers here. You can turn them off, turn them on one by one, see what they do. Okay, I'll just turn them all back on. If you don't want a background texture, turn that off, and it will just fill it with a solid color. Base, this you probably don't need to muck around with too much. Best to leave it probably the darker color. just like that. Okay, I'm just going to adjust this a bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is head up into the adjustments folder, talk about what's in here. So at the top here, I've got this layer called Add Sharpening, and what that is, it basically applies sharpening over the entire design. So if you don't want it, just turn it off. So if you're moving a lot of elements around, what's important to know is if I move this this sharpening layer around, you can see how it leaves a little bit of texture. See, like that. So if you're moving like all these glow elements around, it's best to probably just turn that one off and then sharpen the design after you've made all the changes. So I'll just leave that off for the moment. So these 4 layers here is where we can apply some overall contrast, brightness to the design. Now this one here I've called Curves Adjustment. This is an important one to take note of and play around with when the action's finished. If I turn the one on and off, basically this, if I double click on it, this little handle here, the bottom left, is filling in the shadows white, so you can see that there. So by default I've just turned that up a little bit, so it just fills in those shadows, but check that out with it off, because it might look a lot better with that that much more contrasted look. Or you can just adjust the opacity, play around with the opacity of the layer, just like that. Okay, going on down. Overall brightness, again you can double click on that one. By default I've turned the brightness up a little bit on the design, so you can play around with that. Overall saturation, you can double click on this one. You can make it all a lot more saturated, or you can reduce the saturation. Overall contrast, again, you can drag the opacity of this layer to like 100, 0. What I like to always do is start at 0 and drag to the right, and you get a feel for when it looks the best. So I might just leave it there. I'm just going to play around with this. That. Okay, now these folders here are color options. So the way these work is if you just turn the eye off for the folder, you go down and it just applies some subtle color changes to the design. So you can click through these and see what, you might notice that one looks a lot better. But what I like to do with these is combine them. So by default, color option 1 is on. So you can see it there, it just has like a little bit of a green tint. I could turn that one off. I'll try these other ones. I might like that, but I don't want to use it at 100% opacity, so I can turn the opacity down for that layer, and slowly drag to the right. And then I could try another one. I could try this one. Use a little bit. And what you can also do with these, like I like how bright and the color of those oranges, but if I turn the opacity up on this folder, it sort of crushes them down. But I like what it's doing everywhere else. I like that blue tint over the background and over my subject. So what I could do is I could apply a mask to this folder. So if you go down the bottom here and hit this icon, it creates a mask, and then I can grab a black brush and I can just brush. I'll turn the opacity up for this. I'll turn this up to 100%. So then I can just brush away. You can see the brightness is coming back into those oranges. I might turn the opacity down for this. Turn that one on. You just got to just experiment with these. Just spend a little bit of time playing around. It's pretty good. Alright, what I might do is go back into here, I'll turn that one on, and I might check this with add, pass through. I'm going to try add, and I'm just going to turn off this main glow. No, I think that probably looks the best. I'll turn that one off. Zoom out. Just going to play around with the opacity of this layer a bit. So just go, when you think you've got something that looks pretty good, just go down the line of these layers, turn the visibility off for them, and see, you might notice that, it looks a lot better without any of those textures at all. You just go around and sort of fine tune and experiment. So what am I going to do now? I'll duplicate these lines again. No. I'm going to go into the photo folder, and there's black and white. I'm just going to might go check out that smoke again. It might be a bit too much. Turn that one on and off. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'll leave that how it is. Now, a few other things I like to do is experiment with adding additional glows to the design. So if I just click on the Fury 3 folder, create a new layer, Control Shift N or Command Shift N on a Mac, create a new layer, set it to screen, okay, and hit B on the keyboard, get a brush out, make it a soft opacity, like 50%, and I'll choose orange. Now if I brush, whoops, you see how I can boost those glows. So you can go around, check out the hot spots and brush additional glows in, just like that. Not too much. But what you can also do is if I hit Control U on that layer, I can quickly randomize the color of those glows, so I can check out other colors. Looks pretty good. Play around with saturation. Alright, now one last thing I have been doing recently is flattening the entire design and putting it on a separate layer. So if I hold down Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E on a Mac, you'll see that it's moved the entire design onto a single layer. So now I can I can do a few things, but what I like to do is go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and you get this window pop up here. And I like to play around with the settings over in this right hand side, so I can adjust the temperature of the design. I can make it cooler or hotter. I think cooler works a bit better. You can then play around with the tint like that. That looks pretty cool, that green. Exposure, it's probably good at 0. And so what I like to do with these is just grab that handle and move them back and forth just a little bit, and it gives you an idea if it looks better with more contrast or less contrast. So this one kind of pops a bit more with a bit more contrast. The highlights, we can play around with them. I'll turn them up a bit. The shadows, down a bit. The whites, the blacks. Clarity is like sharpening, so if I drag this all the way to the right, you can see what that's doing. Drag it all the way to the left, it sort of flattens it right out. So I'm just going to, probably doesn't need any. Vibrance, you can play around with that. It's a bit like saturation. Here's saturation here. Click OK to confirm that. So now I've just made all these changes on this separate layer. So what I can do then, if I flick this layer on and off, I can compare against what I've just done then versus all these layers and folders below, which we used to build this effect. So that's a good way of like checking you know, what looks better. But then you might want to like have a blend between the two. So I can select this layer and drag that opacity to 0 and slowly start dragging to the right. So now I'm creating a blend between those two, between this layer and all the layers below. Just like that. Okay, pretty happy with that. But now what I want to do is add some sharpening. So again, if I flatten this entire design, put it on one layer, Control Shift Alt E. If I go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and have the radius at 2, and if I set that blend mode to hard light, just add some really fine sharpening over the design. And I'm just going to play around with that opacity. Just like that. Okay, so that's all there is to the action. Just play around, experiment as much as you can. Encourage you to try and push away from the default result and see what different types of combinations you can come up with. So yeah, if you have any questions or need help with the action, just send me an email and I'll help you out. And just quickly, I'll just compare this against the original, see what we've created. So if this is the type of effects that you're looking to create, you can get that, you can get it done fast and with little effort at all, really.